welcome to this episode of Politics Plus with Nkosi Zulu, where news meets insights and passion. So today we have our guest all the way from Gauteng province in Johannesburg. His name is PIETER Kriel.
That's
is
right.
that right, sir?
That's right.
PIETER Kriel.
Yes.
Okay, so we are just going to give him a chance to introduce himself, and perhaps just give us a little bit about himself and his, interest and insights in politics, because obviously this is the platform where people come and make their presentation in about the political complexes of the country as well as, the geopolitical space. So, Pete, please introduce yourself to our audience and to our viewers and just give us a brief about yourself, sir.
So I'm going to get right to the point. I think that it's important that our youth get involved in the talks of grown-ups because it intertwines so much that, when you're at the age of 17, you literally need to start knowing what politics is and what it needs to accomplish. Because when you turn 18, you have to start voting. You have to look at policy, you have to look at requirements, and you have to make an educated decision. And so I think educating the youth is very important, and that is what I've based my whole short life on. So definitely.
Yeah, it's not short life. It's not short life. Believe us, you still have a lot ahead of you. But in this introductory session or this segment, we just basically want to know who is Pete, where is he from, whom is he born from, and perhaps a bit about your upbringing in relation to the school, the career, and the motivators and your influences into actually even engaging into political issues.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a pretty conservative town where I'd say liberal or leftist values or ideals were just not a thing. I grew up in a house that I'd label as pretty conservative and a school that was conservative. So I grew up with a lot of this conservative narratives in my head, and I had to deconstruct a lot of these things. So I grew up in this conservative town, and my mom, not so interested in politics, played the role of helping me look at things with empathy. So I see myself as a philosopher, and I think rather than sympathizing with fellow South Africans who might be impoverished or who, are struggling, we need to empathize with them, because only when you put yourself in the shoes of the oppressed can you truly know what it's like to be oppressed. So I think that fits in. I had to be different than all the conservative mongrels in my town.
Okay. Okay. I don't even know what mongrels are, but it's okay. One main thing that we actually always try to find out, more especially in the inception of the interview, is the factors that influences. Because once you are sitting in that seat, we want to find out more about our guest. And we want to find out more about the underlying, the foundational basis of the engagements, of whatever engagements that we are going to engage into today. But we want you to tell us if you've ever been in any active or even in society, let alone, the formations or the formal formations such as schools or universities, because you look very young, but we want to see if you've accumulated some sort of activism to this point, because we understand the reason we invited you obviously is because we understand that there is this insights of political understanding. That is why we want you to deliver it here. But through what journey or what active participation has made you accumulate such insights?
So my father works for the local municipality. And growing up, I had the opportunity to hear about politics and the good and the bad. So ever since I was about 17, 18, I've been involved in community projects, started in school, working in townships, providing activism or speaking on hygiene and health priorities and educating people on that, especially in townships and so forth, because they have been displaced. And there's not a lot of opportunity for education in these very densely populated areas, right? So that was a big goal for me, going into the townships, experiencing it firsthand. I think I did mention to you earlier, I had the great opportunity of growing up with a fellow black brother who guided me through all of these ventures. He showed me what it's like spending time in the townships, deconstructing, especially as a white person, thinking the townships are dangerous and that's definitely not a place to go. I've been deconstructed, seeing that, this is a community just as my communities were. And these people just need the kind of opportunities that I, as a very privileged white person, have had. Right? So that plays in.
I'm provoked to ask of your age, because earlier on you were just saying when you reach the age of 18. And I'm actually looking at you and I'm wondering at what age you are. But with that question, if you are able to give us your age, obviously we also want to find out what position did your father play in that municipal setting, because seemingly it seems as if it's been an engagement with the public itself or the communities itself. We would like to know at which capacity would your dad have been employed or perhaps deployed on that municipal setting?
Okay, so I just turned 21 on the 2nd of March. And probably for as long as I have known, my dad has worked for the municipality as a network engineer. So even though not directly involved in what goes on in the political doings of the municipality, I've had the privilege of going with him to work and seeing how all of these things work. And from a very young age, I've been inspired by people governing this country, even though they've done a terrible job. I'll give you that.
No, it's okay. We'll get into that. Don't worry. We have like 40 minutes ahead of us. If you're talking about network engineering, you're talking about this computer networks. So,
yes. Absolutely.
Okay. No, that's great. So have you been assisting your dads in some of these projects?
Absolutely not. I'm not much of a computer whiz. I prefer reading.
Yeah.
And debating. Computers is just next level for me.
No, that's fine. And it's understandable. We see the amount of time that you spend on the internet, on the social platforms, debating all these topics. Any relevant or trending topic, we often observe that you are there. You work with News Nexus?
Absolutely.
Okay. No. Now, let's get deep into it, Pete. I heard you speaking about conservatives. Now, like any other white South African, we know we've often observed some sort of like inheritance. If we talk about inheritance, I'm not speaking in terms of monetary or wealth of that sort, but most white people will inherit the hatred for the black people. They will inherit those apartheid frame of thoughts, even with their perceptions towards issues. You will inherit, sort of like a baseline of the methods or strategies in which you deal with issues in South African setting. We believe that they are an executive set. They are just placed for white people to, because even if we do approach white people, we basically have that mindset to say, okay, because he's white, this is what we must set for him. But in your introduction, I've learned that you are not that type of white. The reason I'm saying all this here now is my question comes here to this. You had a privilege to become like any other white South African and be a conservative and drive that leftist agenda, but you chose otherwise. I understand a bit about as to why. You've basically mentioned that it's because you grew up in a different setting. But then what are the views of some of your fellow white members or white community or society towards you when they see you presenting these issues online or on social platforms in a much more progressive manner?
I think I have to fill in where you spoke about inheriting these mindsets, right? I don't necessarily think that white people as a whole inherited this hatred toward other humanity, but I do think that to a large extent it was taught to white people, because when we're born, we're like a sponge. A baby is like a sponge, and it has to take in all the information it has to survive this world. So, constantly putting in harmful ideologies of black people are dangerous and black people are this and black people are this, and repeating it constantly, especially when you're in that sponge age, you're gonna start believing it. So I was in the position where I was placed in choose between your people and choose between black people. And I think that's the problem white people have. They think when you stand up for equality, it automatically means you're against white people because you want to dispossess them. But they forget that for 400 years, colonial powers have taken advantage of Africa as well as minerals being stolen and so forth.
We'll talk about minerals and stuff that are being stolen, and I'm actually glad it comes from you. You introducing the topic, but I want to put it to you, Pete, that a white South African, this whole topic is not about racial lines or stereotyping or that sort. It's politics. Perhaps we are defining racial lines within politics, which we are going to eventually converge and make a recollection of everything. But I want to put it to you that you seem very young, or you are very young, but with a lot of information. In South Africa, what happens is any white person is always viewed as a custodian of anything that is, obviously, that I've said, an executive order. So it becomes inapproachable to basically speak about such issues decisively, because then you always get that racial divide. That is why I'm asking you now, having an understanding, a much deeper understanding of the conservatives and the leftists in the form of, all these formed political parties that are led by the form of Helen Zille, what you call that other guy that led VF Plus?
Pieter Groenewald.
Yes, Pieter Groenewald. Now, I'm asking myself now, why would you not sit here and perhaps push that propaganda or that agenda? Because all in all, I understand with the liberals in the form of Helen Zille and DA, they push that capitalist agenda. And with in this other setting, and Groenewald and etc., they pushing that a non-extinct agenda, whereby they're saying we are preserving these sort of like cultural values or setting. Now you are coming and you are in between, because I don't think you are accepted. Not that you are not accepted, but then we cannot identify completely with the black society. Now you are basically forming your own fourth society, where you are saying, I'm not going to be a conservative that push a capital agenda. I'm not going to be the one that says we conserve what is who we are. And I'm not even going to go to the extremist, African society, but you basically intertwining yourself. That is my question. Why not your people?
So I think this is probably one of the best questions. A lot of white people especially are misinformed about the fact that if they push inequality and if they push non-equity towards black people, they're just harming themselves because they're part of the economy. So when we indirectly harm our fellow black and brown sisters and brothers, we harm ourselves. So that's what Kriel and Helen Zille, all of these people don't know, and they're hypocrites because they fight for this non-racialism. But that's not what it's about for the majority of South Africans. For the majority of South Africans, it's about fixing the past and bringing everyone to the exact same level, right? Because you can't be equal if one...
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I'll let you, but I just wanted to find out if... Do you think that is possible?
What?
Bringing everybody to almost... Because it will never be exactly the same level, but to almost same levels.
I think that it is important to rise or uprise the classes that have not yet been risen, right? Especially the black community, especially the brown community, because this has been the community that has been disadvantaged historically. So it's not like I'm distancing myself from white people. It's more about, calling unity and saying, stand with me and let's try to understand each other rather than fighting each other. Because that's what it comes down to.
But we do observe that there's a huge gap, basically a huge gap. I mean, from what you've just said, bringing up or uplifting the black community, which is the majority of the society in South Africa, is basically calling for the ones that are sitting on top there to say, you need to come down and, reach to us. And if this white capitalist class, not white, I'm wrong when I'm saying white, because now suddenly we also have this black capitalist class that basically puts them there and classify them themselves, as basically capitalist. If they are unable to reach down and uplift the rest of the society, it's going to be continuing throughout. No matter how much you uplift the others will often raise up because of the economical chain and mechanism that we have in South Africa.
Especially the structure, right? That's why I believe that South Africa needs a totally different type of political framework which we operate on. I mean, we have 12 or 11 official languages. We have many diverse cultures. We just need something that works for not just the majority, but for everyone, right? Because when white people are sad about the fact when we talk about expropriation of land, it's mainly due to misinformation and not being educated on the matter. Because like I said, right, white people, even though they sit, some of them, in big houses and drive fancy cars from privilege, right, they don't know that they are privileged.
Are you not by any chance related to Peter Kriel? I mean, not Peter Kriel, the other Kriel.
Kali Kriel.
Yes, Kali Kriel from AfriForum.
No, I'm not.
Do you know him?
I know him.
In person?
I don't know him personally, but I've engaged with him and his team on numerous social media platforms.
What are your findings with regards to their position or their perspective in relation to land expropriation?
So I'm a big fan of stepping up to being the bigger person. So what they're doing is they're playing the victim card. And I'll say that quite as frankly as it is. They claim to have internal problems, but when facing these internal problems and trying to solve them, they go to the United States of America, who's probably the biggest dictator the world has ever seen in terms of terrorism, in terms of, wars they've fought in the name of capitalism. So AfriForum and Kali Kriel running to the USA shows more about playing victimhood than trying to solve internal problems.
We become very worried, perhaps as normal South Africans, more especially if we have less insight into these political manifestations, because we really do not know if there is ever a formal way in which any organization, more especially an NGO, an NPO, or any formation of that sort, a non-political formation, would actually seek for assistance from any other country. Because we also understand that there is this, down in Western Cape, I wouldn't say Cape Town, down in Western Cape, there is this whole narrative that is driven about that whole Cape, not the whole Cape or some of the Cape, being sold to the Israelis. What can you say on that one?
Well, I think when we look at the amount, maybe not directly being sold to Israel, but when we look at the amount of Israeli nationals coming to the Western Cape, South Africa, that just tells you something about the Democratic Alliance, right? Because the Democratic Alliance, believe it or not, they have always favored the Israel state and what they have to offer to Jews and to the rest of the world in their terms. So it's sad.
Is it worrisome?
Yes.
Then what does it say about the influx of not really, I don't like to call them foreigners because they are Africans, but just going to call it an influx of our African brothers and sisters into South Africa? Then what does that say about the ANC? Because, I mean, you are relating that influx of Israelists to the DA, which I don't think it's validated. But I think if I equate that to what I'm asking now, it will be, then the means or the definitions will be the influx of these African people from, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and all the other North African countries. You equate that to the ANC. Is it the ANC's doing?
Well, I think we have to start by saying that the terminology of, influx of Africans, are from Africa. So there's no way that an African cannot go from here to there and still not be African. Africans have the right to be in Africa. Israelis have the right to be in Israel, right? So I'm not saying they're not allowed to come here legally and contribute to the economy and to unity.
Yes.
But what they're doing is they're coming here and they're propagating a certain type of narrative.
Who are these? The Israelis or the Africans?
The Israelis coming here. Africans coming here from Africa. That's not such a big deal, because that's like saying a fish swimming from one part of the ocean to another. But Israelis coming to Africa is like Martians coming to Earth.
But I think, because I'm sorry if I cut you, but if I think this conversation was derived from being, the conservative topics and the capitalism. We have to roll it off. But we have to have a subjective or sort of like a projective roll-off or continuation of this, because my question or my assertion to you will be, are you not then representing those type of capitalist states of mind, so to say, or perceptions that says, we are here in South Africa, we've got our economy running, and here now we are having Israelis coming to hijack our economies. Are you not afraid? I just want to group you with the capitalists. Are you not afraid that we came here and we exercised or we practiced capitalism, but now somebody else is coming over to practice it even better than us? So the reason I'm putting you as a collective is because I want you to put yourself in those shoes, whereby if you are a good player, then you're bringing in the best player, then obviously the good player will always have that little worry.
Yes, that's a good question. And I think it all comes down to contributing to the collective mindset, right? If you are here and you are fighting for justice and equality and bringing equity to all South Africans, whether black or white, brown and black, who deserve it especially, that's okay. But when you come here,
and you impose
a totally different type of ideology, especially what's going on in Israel. That's sad and worrisome.
But that is what DA did. I mean, not DA in such, but all the conservative people that in the DA and in the form of white people. Which country is your parents from? Like your great parents?
Germany.
That is what the Germans did basically in all our the African countries. They came and they imposed. So why not the Israelis? Why are we not allowing the Israelis? What will be bad about allowing Israelis to come and impose if the Germans did, or if the Dutch did, or if the Americans did?
Okay, so I think it is important also to state that when comparing colonialism and the Europeans coming here and practicing their ideologies to the Israelis, it's important to note that from these European descendants, right, we'll call them colonizers, we've got proud young South Africans, right, that may be white, that actually want to be here and be next to the people that are from Africa,
and be collaborating and integrating
and making this a better place. Because I always say to white people that are racist and fight for the wrong things, I say, if you don't think you belong here, go back to Europe. But the white people that think they want to be here and contribute
and integrate themselves,
and integrate assimilation, right? I think we shouldn't push them away, because in the end of the day, we can't keep on burning bridges. Right?
No, I understand you very much, Pete. Now let's move on. I just want to understand in your form or in your actual perception, what would bring about South African that is integrated in terms of the political landscape? Do we need to have a new political party new political party formed? Or do we need to disintegrate from this political partisan type of politics? What do you think, according to your understanding, would make South Africa great?
I think we'll only see great difference if we have a unified opposition to the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance. Because at this point, we'll not see any change because the opposition parties are scattered and they're not agreeing on things and they're not unified. But if we see a leftist unified caucus or movement or something, we might see radical change. But I don't think it's going to happen with the ANC or the DA or any of their Airbnb situations like the IFP and Action SA and all of those who I think, in my opinion, are branches of the ANC and the DA.
So that means you are basically saying there is something new that needs to be initiated.
Absolutely new. Revolutionary.
Not revolutionary.
Revolutionary.
It's my first time hearing a white guy speaking of revolution,
Absolutely.
in South Africa. You've got to be very grateful, to say, to speak of such words. Then why not join the EFF? Because they're the most revolutionarist antics.
So I've always been open about not belonging to any political party, but I do vote. And I did vote for the Economic Freedom Fighters in the 2024 elections, as I thought that was the best option at the time. And I'll be honest, I did underestimate the power of Jacob Zuma and the MK party.
With the formation of the MK party.
With the formation of the MK party and how they outnumbered the
rest
EFF.
of the,
And that was sad to me.
But what is your insights on basically the influence of Jacob Zuma throughout the political landscape of South Africa? Did you really shoot him down that much to say he wouldn't pull it off?
I have great respect for Jacob Zuma, not because I necessarily like him, but because I believe that he's probably the most influential man in South Africa. When he snaps his finger, you have 100,000 people marching somewhere, and he has influence. And in that regard, I do respect him. But I also think it's important to note that Jacob Zuma did not start the Umkhonto we Sizwe party to fix the problems in South Africa. He created the MK party because he was mad and jealous of the ANC.
Mad and jealous.
Let's be honest, when the ANC realized that they couldn't keep Jacob Zuma anymore for what they claimed he did, they ambushed him. They said, he's the problem, we need Cyril Ramaphosa, and they put him there. And people now say Cyril is better than Jacob Zuma, but that is like saying, that's like comparing cholera and cancer. You've still got an illness.
Have you got any idea how Thabo Mbeki was removed from the African National Congress and being a president?
Yeah.
No, you do not. The reason why I'm asking, the reason I'm asking the question is because you are talking about Jacob Zuma being ambushed. It was worse in Thabo Mbeki. I think probably if we have to compare the two, it will be, obviously the same manifestation of politics within the ANC, whereby they say, as ANC, we see you no longer fit as to be our president or the president of the country. But their influences, once again, it goes back to capital. So the whole narrative or the whole propaganda is propagated by the capital, the capital. So it is not the ANC that will say, we see you unfit to lead us anymore. It will be the capital that will invest inside the ANC through brown envelope politics to kick somebody out from there.
Absolutely. When we look at the investments going into the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, it's funny to notice that it's coming from the same type of people as well, right?
Yeah. Now, please, help us here. Help the viewers at home. Talk to them, more especially the young ones. And more especially those that you might find yourself appealing to in the form of, because I won't lie, probably we could sit here in this podcast and have this session. There'll be a black guy that will be watching this and he will say, hey, what is that white guy talking about? He doesn't know anything. You understand that?
Absolutely.
But then I want you to address that particular person or that particular, whole lot and educate them on what is your wishful undertaking or initiative that we might have to kick up as the youth of South Africa so that we find ourselves integrated as well as moving forward progressively? I understand that you've lost hope. You've just said in this next 4 years, we are not going to be seeing any change. But eventually, after the 4th year, what is it that we might have to do as the youth of South Africa to integrate and revolutionize ourselves so that we find a better South Africa?
I think it's very important that the youth get together, whether that be social media, grassroots campaigns or whatever, educate each other, talk about this, debate, even if you disagree with each other, even if a white person and a black person disagrees with each other. That's not the problem. The problem is not trying to find a solution to the disagreement, right? So when we fight, that is actively searching for a solution. But when we do not fight, then we are complacent to no change at all. So the youth must step up. They must be provocative, they must be revolutionary, and they must be ready to take action when they're called to take action.
Against what or against who?
I think
because the revolution, or even if you have to instigate anything, it will always be against sets of principles or sets of policies or constitution or sets of particular people. So who are we revolting against?
I think a lot of people misunderstand what I mean when I say we have to revolutionize. I think the most important revolution happens in the mind. We have to revolutionize the minds of the people. Because if we do not deconstruct people from this notion that you are different from me and I'm different from you, and therefore we have to disagree and hate each other, if we do not move away from that and revolutionize the mind and deconstruct, we'll never be free, right? Because it starts with the mind. So that's why deconstruction is important.
Yeah, that's called relearning at times. So now, who needs to relearn? I mean, who needs to deconstruct and construct and reconstruct in this form? Because we belong to political parties through obviously voting and stuff. And you've just mentioned you voted EFF on the last elections. But if we are saying we need to reconstruct ourselves, do we then reconstruct ourselves according to the party lines? Because once you associate yourself with those political parties, you are subdued to toe the line. You've got to toe the policies. You cannot then act out of, that cage, because they suddenly put you in that cage, and whoever funds that party is expecting you to toe the line and to basically drive that narrative. At which platform do we then revolutionize ourselves or deconstruct and reconstruct ourselves if it's not within the political parties? Is there, like, I understand you mentioned social media and stuff, but as a collective and a directive?
So obviously I think that it's logical to assume that as individuals we'll never have the power that million rand parties have. But I think when we educate each other, whether that be online, in schools, and we get the right information, we already have a foundation on which to build our future on. So going into the future, I think it's important to know and to accept the fact you don't have to go for a political party. Do your own thing. If your ideas are good enough people will listen. And if you do enough grassroots campaigns, you can get enough people to be committed to a better cause than these corrupt parties. Because let's be honest, they're all corrupt in some sense. Even though I voted for the EFF, there's some disagreements within the EFF.
Are they also corrupt?
That's a dangerous question. No, I don't.
No,
I think.
Do you think they're corrupt?
I think there's corruption within the EFF. I think there's corruption within the ANC and the DA, and I think there'll be corruption within any party any person starts. I think it comes down to eliminating the problems of corruption in the party.
But you still haven't given me, perhaps I haven't been listening, but you haven't given me a directive as to, if I get out of this podcast as we speak, how do I revolutionize myself? On what platform? I understand you want this collective revolutionizing, but on which platform? Because, like I'm saying, most people that are watching here, they are members of particular organizations. They even have their youth leagues in their formations. They say, we are radicals, we are revolutionists, and we are this. But within the corset, which basically puts them in that cage to say, you cannot step out of this policy, you cannot step up out of this line. So they are guided, they are channeled. Now, I want you to make us an example. Who can lead this whole integrated revolution?
I think it will probably, if it comes to this, right, we have to start by saying we have to talk about these things, whether that be on TikTok, YouTube, all of that. We have to talk about it. We have to debate about it. We have to have disagreements. And if we do that enough, we'll have the right foundations. Because when our education is right, we're from grade 1 to grade 12, and we are taught about the things that happened in the past, we have foundation to work in. But a lot of people, they accept party politics policy without first, asking themselves, what do I want as a South Africa? They just go to a party because their parents voted for that party, and they vote for that party without, I have to add this, most people don't even read political manifestos before they vote for a party. And that is sad, because without comprehension...
That's very nice. That's very nice that you mentioned about the manifestos, because you voted for the EFF. Well, then are you aware about the EFF manifestos, manifesto before 2024 elections?
I enjoyed the 2024 manifesto. I thought it was the best manifesto
from the EFF.
Yes, of all political parties. It was the best put together. I wasn't old enough to vote before that, so I didn't have a look at the manifestos at the time. But for 2024, the EFF had the most diverse and inclusive manifesto of all political parties.
Did it speak about expropriation of land?
Yes, it did.
Did it speak about the capture of the minerals or the mineral complex energies? Okay. Now, what is your assertion, perhaps as a young, and I love this, as a young white guy, what is your perception or your assertion towards the fact that each and every person suddenly just stand up and scream, we want back the land, we want our minerals, you are stealing our... What is your perception on that one? So,
I know that for, like I said earlier, 400 years, Africa has been sucked dry. But
by who?
By European colonizers, by people, trying to profit of the doings of other people. But bringing that back, sorry, I lost my thought of train. What were we talking about?
We're talking about bringing back the minerals, bringing back the land, and all the rhetoric.
I think a lot of people misunderstand when we talk about redistributing the wealth. Most white people especially come to the idea that we're coming after your one-bedroom flat, which is absolutely not the case. It's about redistributing the means of production to the people so that they can acquire the wealth and share it equally, whether that being farms, industries, or so forth. But it's not, I think Julius Malema has done a poor job in explaining land expropriation. And let me be honest to you, Julius Malema not explaining it well enough is nobody's fault except his own. I think sometimes he might try to be a bit more provocative and not so much trying to explain what expropriation in the real Marxist sense really is.
No, I understand that. I'll just run through the one before we move on to the next topic, because I find it very interesting, the fact that Julius in himself, as he calls himself the CIC, he speaks about these things, and to you, they are appealing. They are appealing to some, but most white people, it's not appealing. Then he comes again on the very same token, he speaks about allowing the foreign internationals to, come in, or basically a borderless African continent. And then his very same black people, misquotes and misunderstand him on that. So he finds himself as a sandwich now with hatred from the left and the hatred from the right. That is why I'm asking myself, perhaps would he not, a person like Julius or on his caliber, if he practiced such preachings outside of political space, where he just stands up and say, I'm the normal person, I believe that land should be expropriated. I believe that, we should have a borderless African continent. Will that then not be effective? Because once you mention that under a ban of EFF, then we understand, these are liberals, revolutionaries, and people don't take kind to that. Then will it not be good if we have just an open society without any political inclination?
So I think anarchism has been, studied. People would like to live without some kind of rule and law, but there's no space, I don't think, in the era that we're in now, because people are too uncivilized. People don't know anything about politics. People care about growing their own wealth, because that is what capitalism and capitalist ideology is. You have to extort people for a lot of hours for your own enrichment.
So you're basically saying our political landscape is based on capitalism.
Absolutely. It's based on Western-dominated politics. It comes from Europe. I mean, let's be honest. 400 years ago, Europe came to Africa with ideologies that Africans had no idea of. They gave Africans these ideologies. And when they left, these people had no understanding of what Western politics was. So what happened? It led to corruption. It led to misgovernance and so forth. And they blamed it on the Africans.
But do you blame the Europeans? Because then if the Africans allowed themselves to be so susceptible to the foreign methods of running or even governance, then they should have been responsible for what they have accepted, because then they have their own principles and their own policies and system in place of their own self-governance. So you cannot blame anybody that comes in sort of like, even if it's imposing. If I'm allowing myself to be imposed by your ideologies, then I cannot blame you. Who's there to blame? It's myself.
I think it's important. Let's use the analogy of a sheep and a lion. When a sheep has no option but to be eaten, it's going to be eaten by the lion. And that's the same that happened during colonialism. Africans, let's say, were the sheep. They were directly attacked by the lion, by Europeans. So it's not like the sheep wants it to happen. It's part of his nature to be eaten by a lion, unless he chooses to run away or fight back. So that is important. I think Africans have not fought back enough against the injustice of colonialism. And I, as a white person, say that.
Yeah.
Black people have become complacent to allowing what history has done and accepting it, right? Because let's be honest, some people say that, we don't agree with the expropriation of lands. Some black people, and
like me,
you don't agree with it, right? And I think a black person with the right amount of information on the topic would say, you know what, I agree because this and this and this and this.
Yeah, because I mean, I know it's there on what you call as thick books and stuff, what you call compilations, or you call it government gazettes and stuff. But the problem is, we always question, if we are going to expropriate land, whose land is being expropriated? Because there's like a large amount of land that is sitting around, even with property and stuff. And some of it is basically owned by these people that we are seeking to empower, but they are useless. They're not using it into fruition. But I'm not sparking any debates on that one, because you are my guest. You've got to give me your perceptions. Next, are you aware of this thing called Fees Must Fall that took place a couple of years ago? You were very young. Yeah. I want to just give you a brief on that, and you'll have to basically just give me your perception. The leaders of the Fees Must Fall, which was the student movement or revolution. The reason I'm asking is because you spoke about revolutionizing the youth. In one of their negotiations, or in one of their round tables, they decided when they were approaching the, capital in Pretoria, that
Union buildings.
Union buildings. When they were approaching the Union buildings, they created a barrier. They decided that we are going to create a barrier of only white students to go and push on those gates of the union buildings, on those walls, so that it falls over. And the black students were going to follow behind. And the reason they gave us was because the government officials, including the state security in the form of SAPS, the army and stuff, view the whiteness as something that is exceptional, that will be treated a little bit better, as when the black students would have been in the forefront. It would have been easy for them to, use lethal force. But then it succeeded only because there was that white barrier in the front. Now, my question after this is, if in the 21st century, we are still living by that narrative whereby our own leaders in the top first of the hierarchy still view whiteness as an executive, at an executive level, are we then not still in this platform going to be interpreted, or that's a wrong word. Are we not going to be defined by the fact that no matter what we do, we cannot do it on our own? We need to be integrated with the white people, and they must always lead this revolution. My question has to be long, because I want you to understand that the only people that will be able in South Africa to lead a revolution cannot be black people. It will have to be the white people. It will have to be the white formations. Because if the white formations are leading in the forefront, then there is this positive results that are likely to take place. Even with that Zuma Must Fall campaign, it was only after an injection of these white communities that were screaming Zuma must fall, then Zuma fell. So what I'm provoking, or what I'm asking from you is, don't you think if we live with that narrative, we are still a long way to go? We might need people of your caliber or your understanding to lead us through this revolution.
Yes, I think it has less to do with race and more to do with a person's capacity to understand and lead. So when it comes to white people leading the revolution and bringing emancipation to the working class of South Africa, I don't see that happening right now. I believe that we need the majority of the people that live here.
But please, I've just mentioned, in the Fees Must Fall, it took place. The Fees Must Fall was a success because of the white students leading in the forefront. That is why I'm giving you this history. And I've also given you a history about the Zuma Must Fall. It took place because the white people injected their human power, or their pigmentation power, if you call it that.
But I think you're underestimating the power of the black man, because apartheid, to a large extent, ended due to the black youth's resilience in fighting against and standing up against apartheid.
I'm not going to debate that because I've got my own view towards that. But let us move forward, please. I want us to discuss two more topics, very brief, before we close. Let us talk about your understanding of the relationship between this triangular relationship, AfriForum, Donald Trump, and Elon Musk. What is your understanding on that one?
I think Donald Trump is a dictator in the making. I think his policies and his executive orders show that, even though he might not directly be invading other countries and so forth, him speaking about acquiring Greenland and Palestine and so forth, these are all dictator moves. Now, when we bring in Elon Musk, who grew up in the height of apartheid and enjoyed the privilege of it until he was 18 years old, I think him going to the United States and sitting and kissing the feet of a dictator like Donald Trump says a lot about the people and their mindset, especially like those that grew up during the height of apartheid. And it's sad that a South African after the dispensation, after the new South Africa, would go to the United States and cause division in a country he's no longer a member of.
But do you feel we need to perhaps have a collective sort of like a formation whereby we need to call them into order? And if so, how effective can it be, and in which manner can it be done?
I think we have to hold people responsible for, the things that they do, no matter what it is. And AfriForum, for example, going to the United States, like I said earlier, is more damaging to the whites in South Africa than it's good for them. I mean, if Donald Trump really believed in a white genocide in South Africa, he would have intervened. And he's done nothing to thus far, because AfriForum has done nothing more than lobbying. They've not told one single fact. They've only lied about statistics, and they've manipulated statistics.
We will talk more about that perhaps in our next feature of this session, because there's a gentleman here that we might have to invite to this interview to interrogate what you've just presented, because he's a very what you call loyal Donald Trump loyalist. So
I can't wait.
You can't wait. Okay, it's okay. Let's move on to the last one. Or before we give you an open space to basically pass on your message to our viewers. The last one is, you've sent me, prior to you coming to this interview, you've sent me that pie charts whereby you did your statistics. I don't know who assisted you in that one, whereby you basically mitigated or eradicated MKP completely out of future participation in government, or even the segmental part of it. You don't see them resurfacing to be the societal leader, the political societal leader in South Africa.
I don't.
What informs your stats?
So we look at all the internal polling from different political parties, which is available on their sources. And we use artificial intelligence to create a system by which it makes an educated guess based on these statistics to give us a guess. And what we've come up with is that MK would likely fall in the 18% of other parties in 2028, but ANC and the Democratic Alliance is projected to be the two top scorers.
When you look at these statistics, are they basically allocated as per geographically, or are they like a holistic view of these stats? Because I might argue and say, from the position where you are sitting, or by your demographic, if you are doing a statistical analysis or research, it will always be based on what you are exposed to, or who you are exposed to, because we are viewing it. We are seeing a different picture on this side. We see MK as in their rise to basically as contenders of the political space. But yours, your presentation was you put them completely on zero.
And let me tell you why I did that. I believe in political loyalty. So when you say something and when you stand for something, you have to be able to die for what you believe in, right? So I think that the MK party, and this is my opinion, I think that they are more of a chameleon party than the revolutionary type that they'd like to be. Julius Malema and his party with their red berets, literally, they are a revolutionary party. They do grassroots campaigns. They help with struggles and so forth. MK, Jacob Zuma, who's benefited more from white capital than anyone else you know? Jacob Zuma.
I think it's Cyril Ramaphosa. He
introduced the Guptas. He accepted.
Wrong. The Guptas were okay. Sorry, I mustn't say wrong, because obviously, according to your age and presentation that you have. I've basically found out that your understanding, obviously, and we don't blame you, you wouldn't have made enough study of prior politics, because I think when Guptas landed in South Africa, they were introduced even before 1994. It was before 1994 when they landed. They were basically introduced by some of the business associates, whom were the elites at that time. That is even before Nelson Mandela became president. So from there, Guptas have been in the political space. we only, not that we, but the majority of South Africans only learned or became to know about the Guptas when, I'm not talking on behalf of Jacob Zuma or MKP, but my assertion, when propaganda in the form of news agencies propagated them to be associates of Jacob Zuma. So Guptas were here long before even President Mandela became.
Absolutely. But the level of engagement they received, let's be honest, was the highest it ever was during the Zuma campaign. They made their fortunes during the Zuma campaign when we look at the South African case.
But who's supposed to make these fortunes, if not the Guptas?
I don't think anyone should be making fortunes. I think it should be being spent on the people, which it isn't. It's being given to larger tenders. There's a case now I'm not going to name the municipality, but it's in Gauteng, where some of the high top officials in that municipality have tenderized so many things that the amount is now being investigated by the Hawks for up to, I think it's 15 or 20 million rand.
It's in South Africa. It's basically everywhere. Even in down in Cape Town, you find that. In another north part of South Africa, in Limpopo, you get there. In PE, you get this. It's just the reason why we brought you here, to basically give us a solution. But then with this, we only have a couple of minutes. You may give your subjectivity or your narrative or your initiatives or your upcoming initiatives to our viewers, and just tell them what is it that they might expect to see you doing in the upcoming couple of years as developmental states.
I'll definitely continue doing what I'm doing right now. I believe that in my lifetime, the people of South Africa will be free economically, with equity and equality, and that will be my goal. I'll continue to do this, even though it might upset Kriel and Helen Zille, and sometimes probably Jacob Zuma or whoever. But it's really about being that person for the people, right? Because even though I might not be African, I believe that Africa is my place, and I believe that I'm here to make a difference, not just for me, but for society as a whole.
That is very profound. Look, Pete, thanks very much. We've basically have come to an end of this session, and your presentation such very appealing, great, with insights and everything. We are hoping in the next years to come that you grow up and you become the leader that you've presented yourself to be here, because we do need leaders of your sorts, of your understanding. And we hope that the capital does not come and disturb, this bright young man that we have currently here on this episode of Politics Plus with Nkosi Zulu. If you may, just for a minute, as your camera, tell the viewers that you are sitting in Politics Plus with Nkosi Zulu, and ask them to subscribe, follow, and share, my man, in your creative way.
I'm sitting with Nkosi Zulu from Politics Plus. We've just discussed numerous topics of great importance. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's been a challenge. Please do consider subscribing to this channel, liking this video, and sharing it with all your friends so that we can reach the audience we intend to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete. We have come to an